The New York Giants have a massive 2025 season ahead for them, so in this video, I want to talk about the current state of the New York Giants and what I think their future holds for them. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So I think the best way to start off this video is by talking about what the team has done so far in free agency because they've been pretty darn aggressive. So this is via PFF, these are all the moves they've made so far this offseason. They've signed a handful of players like Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland, an underrated signing here in Chauncey Golston, James Hudson, a number of other players, but of course the two maybe biggest signings they've done so far that should have maybe the biggest impact in 2025, Russell Wilson and bringing in Jameis Winston. We'll talk a bit more in detail about how I feel about that, but we'll get to that here in a second. When it comes to re-signings, they re-signed Darius Slayton, which was actually a little bit surprising. I kind of thought he was out the door. They also brought back Greg Van Roten, who maybe could start for them this year, but also could just be a rotational guy. They also brought back, of course, Tommy DeVito as well. So now we look at the depth chart for the New York Giants, and I think the team is getting better. I thought they got better last offseason, but I think there's one key issue that yet again is going to hurt this team long term, and it's of course the quarterback position. So let's have the conversation here about Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. We'll just kind of group these guys into one singular entity because in a lot of ways I feel the exact same about either one of these quarterbacks no matter who starts. I both think that they're both not either long-term options, and I have a hard time imagining that they're going to be the consistent answer in 2025. Like, I think Russell Wilson is arguably a step forward than what they had last year. Last year, they had a couple games with Daniel Jones. It did not work out. He did not look good. Then Drew Lock came in there, played a couple games and looked okay here and there. So I do think Russell Wilson and maybe even Jameis Winston are both upgrades over what they had last year. I just don't know if they are significant enough to really get this New York Giants team to another level from what they were last year. Again, they have the 3rd overall pick for a reason. They were a bad team last year, and I have a feeling they're probably going to be a bad team again next year because I don't really believe in the quarterback room that the New York Giants have. And this is no disrespect to Russell Wilson or to Jameis Winston. I just personally believe that at this stage of their careers, both of these quarterbacks have sort of been figured out by defenses. Teams know what Russell Wilson struggles against. Teams know how to force Jameis Winston to be turnover prone. Like, these guys have years and years and years of film, and it's not like these guys have room for growth either. They're both older veteran quarterbacks that at this stage of their careers should probably just be backup / veteran guys for a younger quarterback. But unfortunately for the New York Giants, they don't really have that young quarterback, which now puts them in a weird position at number 3 overall, where there is the chance that Shedeur Sanders is still there or a guy like Jackson Dart. So do you potentially take that quarterback in the 1st round and then build out the rest of your roster with the rest of your draft? Even though I don't personally believe, nor does basically everyone believe, that Shedeur Sanders should probably not be taken top 5 because he's not worthy of a top 5 pick. So it's kind of a weird predicament for the New York Giants where the quarterback class in 2025 just is not strong enough, and they were not aggressive enough in free agency to seriously address these issues. Because when you look back to what the free agency class looked like at the quarterback position, you were looking at guys like Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, those sort of guys, and of course Aaron Rodgers too, who I guess the Giants are technically still in on, but I don't think they are anymore. So they put themselves in a position where they weren't aggressive enough. They did not get Matthew Stafford, which there was a lot of rumors they were trying to. They also didn't even really, I don't think that I know at least, tried to get Geno Smith, which would have been, in my opinion, a perfect answer for their quarterback room. And so they ended up with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, who you guys know how I feel about them. I don't like either quarterback as being the starting guy. So unfortunately, in an offseason where there was some quarterback movement, the New York Giants kind of got the small end of the stick here with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and not a guy like Geno Smith nor Sam Darnold, who, I mean, yes, they're more expensive options, but I think they're much better quarterbacks. And even if you brought in a guy like Geno or Sam Darnold, you still could have taken a quarterback in either this year's draft or next year's draft while also having the temporary answer for your quarterback room. And I think there's also another layer added onto this of the jobs of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, who are both, let's be honest, ticking time bombs at this point, where it feels like these guys have to have a successful 2025 season or else they're probably going to get fired, which at this stage I think is about right at this point because they've tried for multiple years and they haven't really ever looked the same as they did all the way back in, I guess, 2022, where Daniel Jones and Saquon led the team to the playoffs. Again, I look at this roster, and it's a good roster. So for Brian Daboll, this team has to be successful now. Do I think it's a perfect roster that can make a deep playoff run? No, I don't think they're that good. I think the defense on paper looks really solid. I think the offense has some pieces, but it still has clear limitations. But again, the biggest limitation again, is the quarterback room. Like, it's been the Achilles heel of this team. It's been the Achilles heel of Brian Daboll's tenure here the entire time. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to have any sort of really solid answer for that position heading into next year. We'll talk a bit more about what I would personally do at the 3rd overall pick. Would I take Shador? Would I take somebody else? We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but I did want to go through the rest of the offensive roster and then talk about the defense. So let's get back to the depth chart. When it comes to the offensive end, I think the weapons for either Russell Wilson or whoever plays quarterback next year are pretty solid. Tyrone Tracy had a really solid rookie season, and I talked about him in my last video where I did a steals of the 2024 draft video, and Tyrone Tracy was one of the guys who was the biggest steal of the draft. Total big time steal late in the, what was it, the 5th or 6th round. He was totally worth that pick and does look like he will potentially be the big time starter next year. You also still have Devin Singletary, so you have 2 options at the running back room. I also would not eliminate the idea of taking another running back in like day 3 to just add more depth there, and I do think that they could find a really good back in like rounds 4 or 5. Receiving core wise, they bring back Darius Slayton, which yet again I thought was a big time pickup for them, but Malik Neighbors continues to be the #1 receiver here. Wandale Robinson plays more in the slot, and then you bring back Darius Slayton, which I thought was a really nice pickup for this team. Again, somebody who I thought was out the door, but they brought him back. Theo Johnson theoretically should be stepping into a bigger role now that he is in his 2nd year, a 4th round rookie tight end last year, had about 300 yards, but I think the expectation is that he could be a bit more of a threat in 2025. We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. You look at the offensive line, and yet again, I still think the offensive line is a big time weakness for this team. Andrew Thomas, total star at left tackle, but just needs to stay healthy. Jermaine Illuminor, I would imagine, probably sticks at right tackle, either him or James Hudson, because I don't think there's a world where Evan Neal gets the start. But then you look at the interior of the offensive line, it's getting a little bit older with Greg Van Roten and John Runyon. And John Michael Schmitz just hasn't really looked the same that he did early into his rookie season. So I think the interior of the offensive line definitely could use a big time upgrade. Maybe they spend an upgrade in rounds 2 or 3. Moving to the defensive side of things here, I think the defense actually looks really good on paper. They brought in Paulson Adebo, they brought in Javon Holland, 2 big time pickups to fix a secondary that frankly last year was not very good. So now when you look at the secondary, you have Paulson Adebo, who could theoretically be your CB1. You're hoping and praying that Deonte Banks can develop into being a really solid cornerback 2 next to Paulson Adebo. And then Andrew Phillips was a big time steal. Again, I talked about him in my last video, so if you want more information about those guys, Drew Phillips was for sure on the video because he was a big time steal in rounds, I believe 3 or 4, but wherever he was taken, Andrew Phillips was awesome last year, played a big time role in the secondary, and I think moving forward is going to continue to play a big time role in the secondary. You also had Tyler Nubin last year, who played like 700 snaps and had a really solid season, and of course Javon Holland, who in 2024 probably had maybe one of his worser, if that's even a word, but one of his worst years in the NFL. But we all know how good Javon Holland can be when he's playing at his highest level, and I just feel like this is a really solid replacement for what you lost last year in Xavier McKinney, which, let's just keep it a buck here, the New York Giants just should have re-signed Xavier McKinney because Xavier McKinney is young and a total star. But I digress. You end up replacing him with Tyler Nubin, who probably plays more of a strong safety role, and then Javon Holland, who can kind of float around. There's going to be some flexibility there with both those guys. Would not take it out of the possibility that they draft another safety, maybe more of like a rangy or free safety sort of style guy, but they have some guys below them who I feel pretty confident in. So in totality, I look at the secondary, and you don't have to start Cordell Flott no more. Deonte Banks, you're praying can develop in year 3 because he's shown signs of being a really good corner, but he's really inconsistent, and man, his lows are extremely low. I do think the strength of this defense does lie within its front 7. Right now, Dexter Lawrence is maybe the best nose tackle, the best interior defensive lineman in the NFL. I think there is a strong argument for Dexter Lawrence at this point. Brian Burns is out there, Kayvon Thibodeau, who by no means, in my opinion, do I think either Kayvon or Brian Burns are like the upper echelon of pass rushers, but I think they're both really, really good guys, especially Brian Burns, maybe not so Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau can be a little bit inconsistent, but these are 2 guys who are capable enough, can get to the quarterback, and just cause a lot of mayhem. I mean, when you have a Brian Burns and you have a Kayvon Thibodeau, but you also pair that with a Dexter Lawrence, it really does make it quite difficult for offensive lines to handle those guys. And not only that, but you also bring in Chauncey Golston, who quietly last year had 5.5 sacks, even though he didn't get a ton of playing time last year, but was a big part of that Cowboys defense that sort of turned things around late into 2024. So I think the additions of Chauncey Golston, with what you already have on this defensive line with Dexter Lawrence, Raheem Nunez, Roches, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau. And I think this defensive line looks significantly better on paper. I also would not take it out. Again, we've talked about what they could do in the draft. I think that potentially adding another pass rusher as more of a depth option could also be in play here. So in totality, I look at this Giants team just pure roster wise, and I don't think it's necessarily bad. Now, by no means do I think this team is ready to go from being a team that misses the playoffs to all of a sudden making the playoffs and making a potential deep playoff run. Like, I don't think that this Giants team is that good, but I think just theoretically speaking, it has the foundational pieces to get the team going in the right direction. Defensively speaking, this was one of the more disappointing defenses we've seen these past few years. But I think theoretically, and again, just on paper, the defense does look like it is ready to take a big step forward next year. Last year, the defense ranked 20th in points per game allowed, 23rd in yards per game allowed. They were a poor run defense. Against the pass, they were okay. They had a pretty high sack percentage. So, yeah, this is a defense that was pretty disappointing the past few years and a little bit last year. But again, I say this theoretically, just on paper, it does look like this team should take a big step forward. Just kind of comes down to, can guys like Deonte Banks, can they step forward? Can Kayvon Thibodeau have a big year in 2025? And then on the offensive end, your offensive line needs a lot of work. So can Tyrone Tracy work with maybe not the greatest offensive line? Can Theo Johnson take a big step forward in year 2? Can Andrew Thomas stay healthy? Can they get good play out of Jermaine Illuminor? And can the interior of the offensive line hold up? These are all big time questions for the New York Giants that they probably would like to have answers for before they start the 2025 season. Like, they have legitimate issues on this roster. Not to mention, you look around at the NFC and there's a lot of really good NFC teams. Hell, you look within the NFC East and you have the Super Bowl champions, the NFC champion runner-ups in the Washington Commanders. Dallas Cowboys still have a pretty solid roster. So, like, the Giants have an uphill battle to climb, and I don't want to get any Giants fans' hopes up that all of a sudden I think the Giants could be playoff contenders or anything like that. Like, I think they're pretty far away from that. But theoretically speaking, if some of the guys can step up, then I could see this Giants team looking okay next year. But now let's talk about what this team should do with the 3rd overall pick. And I think there's really 4 options they can play here, and I think a couple of the options make a little bit of sense. Option 1, take either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, because more than likely one of those two guys will be there. If I had to assume, probably Travis Hunter, unless the Titans shock the world and don't take Cam Ward, but then I'd assume the Browns would just take Cam Ward. So either way, I do think one of Carter or Hunter will be available. If for whatever reason that does not happen, which again I think is just crazy to even think about, then you take Cam Ward and then you have Cam Ward being your starting quarterback and you don't think twice about it. But I don't see that happening, by the way. So I think option A, Hunter or Abdul Carter. Option 2, you take Shedeur Sanders. Yes, it could be seen as a reach, but this is a Giants team that, frankly, has to find their franchise quarterback here really soon. And I don't know if that Brian Daboll is realistically going to be given another offseason and another draft in 2026 to find that guy. So they may be in a room, in a situation where they kind of have to take a quarterback, whether it is Dart in the 2nd round or potentially Shedeur Sanders in the 1st round. So that would be the 2nd option. The 3rd option would be to trade down, accumulate more assets, and just maybe take the best offensive lineman available or just the best player in general. And the 4th option, I guess, would be to just take another player, like maybe you're really high on Ashton Jeanty, more so than like a Travis Hunter, which I don't understand why you would be that way, but hypothetically, let's just say the Giants could think that way. So maybe the 4th option would be to draft a guy like Ashton Jeanty or Tetairoa McMillan, or maybe they're just so high on Armand Membu / Will Campbell, they would consider him at 3. So of those options, I'll just tell you right away which ones I like and which ones I don't like. I do not like the idea of taking Shedeur Sanders 3rd overall, and I don't like the idea of taking somebody not named Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter. So those 2 options to me are completely taken away. For me, if it is up to me and I am the New York Giants, I am sticking in at number 3 and either taking Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. Even though those are 2 players in which their position, no value for the team wouldn't be that much. Like, Abdul Carter would be great, but they already have Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. But if you go ahead and take an Abdul Carter, that might make a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau a little bit more expendable, which could open up a little bit of extra money. Plus, it's just Abdul Carter. He's a freak of nature. I don't think he'll be there, so I think it's more likely that Travis Hunter will be there. If Hunter is there, then Deonte Banks is on the chopping block, and I think Travis Hunter can go both ways, where he can play receiver, play opposite of Slayton, play opposite of Neighbors, while also playing some defense as well and playing opposite of Paulson Adebo. no matter where you line him up, he is somebody that will bring a lot of energy, a lot of excitement to the organization. So I think it would make a lot of sense, even though I would make the argument that those positions, cornerback, receiver / edge rusher, really aren't that valuable to the New York Giants because they kind of have those positions figured out. Which then leads me to a potential other option that I don't necessarily hate either, and that would be potential to trade down in the first round. When I look at the board here, obviously the New York Giants are picking third. I would be comfortable moving down anywhere from 3 down to about 8, maybe even 9. If for whatever reason the Saints want to trade up to take Shedeur Sanders at 3, I would feel okay about moving to 9 because I still feel like I can get a top tier talent. If I want to move down just a few spots, I can see the Raiders potentially being interested in Shedeur Sanders, even though they have Geno Smith. I could still see it. Maybe you trade down with the Raiders. Hell, maybe the Raiders want to add a cornerback like Travis Hunter, which could make a lot of sense. Or the Giants could trade down to pick 8 to the Carolina Panthers, who maybe the Carolina Panthers are going to trade up to 3 to take a guy like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. In terms of what the packages could look like, I guess we could theoretically just look at it real quick. Hypothetically speaking, the Titans take Cam Ward, and then, of course, just for the mock draft's sake, Shedeur Sanders goes 2, which is just absolutely funny. I don't see that happening, by the way, but it just happened to happen in this draft. Let's say the Giants want to move down to, let's start off with the Carolina Panthers. I do think this is a realistic one here. I think you're talking, obviously, a pick swap, 8-3, and I think that maybe you're looking at adding, I don't know, a second round pick, maybe even a little bit more. I don't see it being 2 first round picks. Maybe it could happen. I guess it would depend on how much the Panthers view a guy like Carter or a guy like Travis Hunter. So this is a possible trade. Then there'd be like the the New Orleans Saints, and I think it would be again a very similar trade package here. This one's from 9, so maybe you're talking a pick swap, a second round pick, and maybe like, I don't know, another pick later in the draft. That could also be a possibility. So moral of the story is, if you were to trade down, you could get some serious value for that pick, while also trading back at picks 8, 9, maybe even 6, maybe a few picks before that. Who cares who at this point? And if you sit in there and you have that happen to you, I think the Giants could be in a good position to take the best offensive lineman on the board, like a Will Campbell or Armand Membu. Maybe you want to add another cornerback, so you take Jahdae Barron or Will Johnson. Maybe you want to add the next best pass rusher, not named Abdul Carter, so maybe you're going for like a Mike Green. All in all, trading down does make a lot of sense. What would I do? I would probably just take Travis Hunter / Abdul Carter and just have the best talent on my team. But if you want to accumulate assets, not to mention if there is a team realistically willing to give you 2 first round picks for pick 3, I would easily consider that and just take Will Campbell or, an offensive lineman to fix up my O-line and bank that maybe Jackson Dart falls to the 2nd, or maybe banked that potentially you can get a quarterback next year. Or hell, maybe you trade back from 3 to 8 and Shedeur Sanders is still there, and maybe you can stomach the idea of taking Shedeur pick 8 over pick 3. I don't know, just kind of throwing that out there. So all in all, I think the New York Giants are heading in the right direction. I think as a roster, the team is getting better, but again, the quarterback position is their ultimate Achilles heel. I don't know what they're going to do at pick 3. I think that they are one of the more interesting picks of the draft, because I do think picks 1 and 2 are, I don't want to say certain, but almost close to certain. Like, I think Cam Ward goes 1, and I'm assuming Abdul Carter goes 2, although it could be Travis Hunter as well. Would not be shocked either way. So I think the Giants are in an interesting position, but you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you think of the New York Giants, and what should they do at pick 3? Love you guys. Peace.